What you're looking at here is our recently acquired private tree plantation registration for our farm and for trees that we planted this year. What this allows is for future harvesting and use of the trees we planted on the farm if we choose to do that. It also makes it so we can sell the lumber or other products of these trees if we'd like to. We're putting up a separate video outlining the process we went through to get this registration, so please look at that if you'd like more information on the registration process itself. The purpose of this video is to go over our motivations for getting the registration, which go hand in hand with the philosophy behind our farm and developing our forest reserve. So at the end of 2020, the DENR put out Administrative Order DAO 2020-18, and we'll include a link to that if you'd like to read it. The goal of that is, quote, promoting tree plantation development and liberalizing the harvesting and transport of planted trees and tree derivatives for inclusive growth and sustainable development. Now, to put this law in context, the harvesting of trees and selling their wood and other products is highly regulated in the Philippines and has a fairly complicated history. I'll include some interesting links in the description if you'd like to read about it some more. I'd suggest you do look into them, they are quite interesting. But as an overall summary, the Philippines, like many tropical countries, has lost a large percentage of its forests to several factors, including legal and illegal logging, fuel wood consumption, expansion of permanent agricultural lands, and also a loss of traditional practices which had previously maintained forest regeneration on utilized land over time. This loss occurred some under Spanish rule and was rapidly accelerated during the American occupation in the early 1900s. Which brought about industrial methods and the rapid increase in technology that was seen during that time period from about 1900 to the end of World War II. And it continued after the Philippine independence in the post-World War II era, with logging peaking in the 1960s and 70s. How much forest was lost and how much still remains seems to vary by source, and it depends on how they're defining what constitutes a forest in terms of land area, percentage of cover, and tree composition. So, for instance, source might consider land reforested if it's replanted for palm oil or for non-native timber species, while others might exclude those situations. But in any case, it's recognized that most of the forest cover in the country has been lost, and native trees and biodiversity in particular have suffered. And there have been many laws, orders, or decrees to try to regulate and reverse forest loss. And the country has strict regulations on the legal harvest of trees. While public lands in the Philippines are regulated in terms of tree cutting and the use of trees, many restrictions also extend into private land use also. From many conversations I've had, this has affected the attitude towards tree planting on private land. So just anecdotally, nearly everyone I've spoken with is warned against planting native trees on your property here. Specifically, Nara came up often as something we should avoid planting. And what's behind those warnings is the idea that it's nearly impossible to cut the trees once they're planted. So you're effectively giving up any potential future alternative use of your land if you plant these trees on your property. There's this romantic idea of farming that a lot of people have. You're out in nature, you're working with plants, but at the end of the day, it's a business and farmers need to eat. And a lot of farmers have a large part of their net worth tied up in their land. So there's naturally going to be some hesitation if someone thinks they're permanently giving up some of that land to trees. I'm not sure how widespread that idea is that you can't cut your own trees in the Philippines, but it would be very interesting to see a well-done study looking into that and its possible consequences on tree planting on private land. This leads us back to our private tree plantation registration and why we wanted to get it. So if we're interested in conservation, why are we talking about cutting trees? And the first reason is we wanted to have proof of concept. So it does take some effort, but you in fact can legally harvest trees that you planted on your own property here, including native trees. And our thoughts are that if more people see planting trees as not just something they can do to benefit the environment, but also as an economic opportunity, something that will add value to their land, more native trees would be planted. And even if the trees are harvested in the future, while they are growing, waiting to be harvested, they're having a positive effect on the environment that wouldn't be there otherwise if the land was being used for more traditional crops. So while farm trees are growing, they're providing benefits to wildlife, and they're transforming carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into useful and often beautiful resources that can benefit us. Also, if there is a steady source of ethical lumber, there will hopefully be a positive effect on areas which have not been deforested. So if there is a steady source of legal ethical lumber and other tree products, the demand for illegal sources of these products would hopefully be reduced. That way, the places where nature benefits most from the trees, the old growth natural forests with dense biodiversity, will be less likely to be destroyed just for the sake of getting the lumber from a few of the trees that are in those forests. And beyond the commercial aspect of the farm, like we said when we started this project, we aren't planning to convert the entire property into a commercial plantation. A lot of the footage that you're seeing in this video is of secondary forest that's already growing on the farm, and we'd like to reserve those areas and expand that part of the farm also to remain as a permanent native forest. Although when applying for this registration we listed all of the trees that we had planted, we aren't planning to cut all of those trees that we've listed on the registration once they're a harvestable size. We did want to list them though, because occasionally, even if you don't plan to, you need to cut a tree for one reason or another. Maybe it dies or falls in a storm, who knows. There's already regulations in place that allow for harvesting trees in these situations. And there's still some additional regulations that we need to abide by. This registration makes it much easier to utilize those trees if we decide that we need to. So I hope this video has helped clarify some of our goals and the reasoning behind our project. Looking ahead, let's hope that in the future we can easily go to a local supplier and build a building or buy a piece of beautiful furniture, knowing that the wood we're using is benefiting the local economy and came from a method that did more good than harm. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below. And if you're interested in knowing the process we went through to get this registration, please see the video that we made specifically on that. Thank you. Have a nice day.